Yeah.
Good evening. Welcome to Progressive Soup. My name is David Stevenson, co-host with Emily Volpintesta.
Hello.
And we have two guests on that are going to talk a little bit further. We've had some conversations lately about a fellow named Bernie Sanders.
Presidential
candidate Bernie Sanders.
Democratic presidential
candidate Bernie Sanders. And Taylor and Debra are both first-time involved in a campaign, basically, of any kind. They'll correct me if I'm wrong about that, but to my knowledge, they're early in their political careers and learning and involved. And Bernie has a lot of folks. We've had a lot of other folks on that are first-time people involved in presidential politics, and it's pretty exciting to feel the enthusiasm, feel the burn. But I'll let them introduce themselves. Taylor.
So my name is Taylor Biniarz, and this is the first campaign that I've been involved in, as I'm 19. So there hasn't been a lot of chances for me to be involved in other campaigns.
Why Bernie?
The reason I like Bernie, and a lot of other people think that it's just because the fact that he wants to give free college education, but I really like the awareness that he brings to a lot of causes, such as mental health awareness and knowing that a lot of people in prison suffer from mental illnesses and they're not getting the treatment that they need to get.
Debra, reintroduce yourself to our audience.
Thank you. I'm Debra Cohen. I'm from Wethersfield. I'm at the opposite end of the age spectrum from Taylor. I'm 64, and this is my first time out campaigning for a candidate. In the past, I have certainly voted and voiced my opinion, but this is the very first time when I felt like this is work that I need to do.
So you had a question?
No, I was, it's just, you pretty much explained it all, that we have, both Bernie supporters, and you're both being affected and got involved for different reasons, obviously.
Right. I mean, I'm looking at retirement and Social Security and Medicare. Although those aren't the primary things that got me involved in the campaign, what got me involved was all of the things that I became aware of through the Occupy movement. And when I first heard Bernie Sanders, I thought, this man is exactly where I am on those issues. And I firmly believe that if we level the playing field financially, a million other things will fall into place.
No, and it's interesting how Taylor mentioned free college education, and I'd spent some time in Italy, and I know that it is possible to. They have free college education and health care provided to the people, and how you had mentioned before we started filming how you saw the movie this weekend.
Where to Invade Next.
Where to Invade Next,
right.
And I believe they talk about they invade different. They talk to people in different countries that do provide these things.
Right.
Free healthcare, free education, and these are services that are possible to have in a society. And I think it's good that Bernie is talking about these things and giving us hope that we can change things.
Agreed.
So it's exciting.
My heart is still with Elizabeth Warren. Elizabeth Warren was my candidate. She would be my candidate. She's not running. So, having said that, I looked at the different candidates that are out there on both sides of the both parties, and Bernie Sanders best reflects my values and the values that Elizabeth Warren talks about. So I think that's something I wanted to bring out. That he's not my first love, but he's represents what I believe in. And I've been following him for a very long time. He's been in Congress for decades. Prior to that, he was governor of Burlington, Vermont, and did a lot of good stuff there. And he's just he speaks for me. It's as simple as that. Continue talking about the issues and what brought you in.
Well, I actually have a question for you.
Yeah.
I'm curious. What is it about Elizabeth Warren that calls to you that is not with Bernie or part of his?
I'm not sure. She fulfills another desire of mine, and that's to have the first woman president. And I really do want to have a woman president.
Not Hillary.
That makes it very difficult, and I think it makes it very difficult for a lot of folks that support Hillary Clinton because they want to see the first woman president. And that's a very noble gesture, and it'll be a great day when we have the first woman president. But you have to look at candidates and not judge a candidate by, as Dr. King would say, the color of their skin, but the content of their character. You have to look at them for where they are on the issues, for where they stand, what their history is. And in that sense, Bernie Sanders is a pretty good facsimile of Elizabeth Warren in terms of their beliefs and what they stand for.
We'll take it.
Okay.
And she wouldn't. Weren't there talks of her being a vice presidential candidate?
I don't know, but I haven't thought about it because she appears not too interested in doing anything other than taking her role in the Senate and working hard on those things that she advocates for in the Congress of the United States. But so you're new, 19 years old. What's your background? What have you been doing with your life up to this point?
Well, I went to Rockville High School in the vocational agricultural program, and I live in Ellington. And after I finished high school, I went on to a certificate school where I became a medical assistant, an electronic health record specialist, and a phlebotomist, which is where you can draw people's blood.
Yeah.
Yes. And
Don't we call those vampires?
yes, sure.
Okay.
But I found myself being drawn more and more not to medical but to political. And so that's when I was on the internet and I saw something that listed Hillary Clinton and then things that she has done, and Bernie, and then where he stood on the things and where she stood on them, and I just went, wow, I side more with Bernie. And it is tough for me because being 19 and female, I really want a woman president. Like,
right.
I wish that we could have one, but we need the right one, because if we don't have the right one, they can use that as an excuse in the future to not elect another female president and say, well, look what happened the last time we had one.
Interesting.
And if you had told me 5 years ago that I would be, instead of voting for a female, that I would be voting for a 74-year-old old Jewish, guy from Vermont, I would have looked at you like you were crazy. But the thing is that if you tell somebody to vote for a female just because they're female, it's the same as telling somebody to vote for a guy because they're a guy.
Right.
That's a very astute point. Yeah, and so far, particularly in New Hampshire, that's kind of what's happened. Is that young women, particularly, but women all the way up to women in their 60s have.
That's great. I'm very happy to be in my 60s.
no disrespect intended.
I understand.
Have gone very strongly for Bernie Sanders.
And it's not just so that they can meet boys.
And this.
I'd be curious. What were some of the issues? You said you looked at Hillary's points compared to Bernie's. What were some of the issues that you liked about Bernie?
Most of it was that he voted against the war, and even though I was really young when the war happened, even growing older, I still didn't understand why it needed to happen the way it happened, and also just the fact that he just seems like a good person. My dad and my mom, and then my mom's husband, my stepdad, raised me to choose the person and not the party. That there can be good Republicans and bad Democrats and good and bad independents and all of that. And I just really liked who Bernie is as a person. And looking at Hillary, yes, she's done good things, but at the same time, I saw a lot of discrepancies, especially with the LGBT community, and how it's great when somebody comes around and says, it's okay, to have gay marriage and all of that, but at the same time, if then they act like they've been fighting for it for a long time, it seems fake, which it is. And Bernie's been fighting for the LGBT community since before he got involved, and that's something that really mattered. That he's been fighting for it since he started. And Hillary, while it's great that she came around, I love that she came around, doesn't address the fact that she didn't come around for a long time, and she kind of
Right.
presumes that she's been doing it for a while.
Right. Another issue I noticed, I watched a debate in Milwaukee on last Thursday, I believe, and the issue of healthcare came up, and how, Bernie said, oh, he's all for universal healthcare, and then Hillary said, oh, she came up with the idea back in the 90s when Clinton was president, and how they had all, she brought it up before, was it Congress or who she brought it up before, and then it got shot down just as easily, and they never really continued the fight. But I thought it was interesting how she was saying how, she came up with the idea and she was fighting for it, and then all of a sudden, because my father's a physician, and I remember everyone was all excited about changes in healthcare, but then it was just easily shot down and no one ever heard of it again. So I would just be curious, if she became president, would she give up just as easily if she did bring about changes in healthcare? Because she seems to have some ideas about, bringing about some kind of changes in our healthcare system. But I'd just be curious, if she didn't get the support that she wanted, would she fight for changes or just let it go as easily as she has done in the past? So.
My understanding is that, excuse me, what she would like to do is make improvements to the healthcare system as it stands now. Bernie wants to go to single payer and really change the system.
Which is kind of back to the way it used to be, in the sense that, everybody, back in the old days, we didn't have HMOs. They came into play in the 70s. But before then, you found yourself a doctor. Well, I guess in that context, not an old style, because that was the style, but from today's perspective, an old style family doctor that you went to, and they figured out a way to take people in and give people the health care that they needed, to advise them and to spend a little time with them and help people improve their health and keep their health in good shape.
Right.
But now we've got with the HMOs, and we've talked at length on many shows about HMOs and how they kind of upset the apple cart and made it tough on doctors too, because your dad's talked at length about how doctors have to be in a constant battle with the HMOs for coverage and for tests and things that their patients need. There is someone in the middle of your relationship with your doctor, and that's the HMOs. It's not the government, it's the HMOs.
It's become an entirely different kind of business. It's gone from medicine to business.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's something never should happen that way. And you know that as well as anybody. She's Emily's dual citizenship Italian American, so she's been to Italy quite a bit. So she knows how it is over there and can make a very accurate and fair comparison between the two countries. And in fact, I guess it's every country in the world probably, except for us.
Except for us.
Yeah, we're kind of like dragging up the rear as far as that.
And then they say it's impossible, and the rest of the world is like, it is possible.
Right.
And we used to have it. And we used to have it before HMOs.
And I often wonder if that's why they make traveling so difficult now, because it almost seems as if they want Americans traveling to learn that there is another way to live.
We don't want you to see the possible. That's a very funny point.
Yeah, and that's a lot of the hope that Bernie brings up to me, is that he talks about things that are very, very, very much possible. We just have to make them happen, and we have to speaks of a revolution, but it's a revolution in terms of just really, in fact, turning back the clock in respect to a lot of important things that used to be standard practice in America, and bring those good things back. There's a lot of stuff in the past that wasn't very good. We know that. We remember, with deference to our former Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia, the originalist who wants to take us back to 1776, where women couldn't vote, blacks were enslaved. That was all well and good. It was all peaches and cream back then. No, this country and this Constitution have evolved, and we need to keep moving forward. And that's where the word progressive comes from.
I can't improve on what you just said.
No, you can. A lot of this stuff that I'm saying, I hear from you. I'm just kind of reflecting a lot of what I hear from you.
Well, thank you.
Well, can I just say it's interesting, because I think one of the talking about this film Michael Moore came out with. I think he's saying how Europeans or people in other countries, or even as a student, Taylor, I mean, are people, when tuition goes up in Europe, Italians are, the students, they riot, they refuse, they go out in the streets,
right.
But here, something goes up and people just like, oh, okay, fine, I'll just pay it. And why do you think it is that Americans don't revolt, they don't protest, they just kind of accept things kind of like, I don't know what you call it, not to call us sheep. I mean, here's an example, I'm sorry, but I had this, when I lived in Italy, I had a friend, and he did a semester high school transfer exchange program, and he said he was taking a gym class, and in order to play sports, you had to do a urine test. And he said everyone just kind of went along with it, and he's saying, oh, you're all cheap and you just do whatever you're told, and he refused, and he probably got sent back to, or maybe he took it and maybe he was smoking pot, I don't know, but the point is that he said, and it made me really look and question and say, wow, when I was in school, would I have done something just because someone insisted, oh, if you want to play sport, you have to submit to a urine test? Or even, when I've done jobs, as I became a massage therapist and I worked at a hospital, they said, you have to get a flu shot. And as I got older, I said, no, I don't want to get a flu shot. I'm responsible for what goes in my body, and my father's very respectful of that. He doesn't make me get a flu shot, but I just think that we don't question. We just kind of do what we're told, even though it might be harmful to us. What are your
I think that when you don't understand that there's a whole other community around you,
right?
That thinks the way you do, and you think that you're going out on a limb solo to raise your voice and say no.
Right.
That is frightening for most people, I would say. And I hate to keep coming back to Occupy, but what that did was to open up the field, and it made people realize that there were other people around them, surrounding them, who felt the same way. And for many people, I think it's easier to pick up the sign and stand on the corner, or to make a phone call, or somehow to publicly make a statement about what they believe and what they're passionate about, because they don't feel like they're doing it alone.
Yes.
I know it's part of the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing now. I don't feel like it's just me standing out on a ledge.
Right, and it takes a lot of courage to do what you're doing,
I went down to Wall Street. I call it opening day because I'm a baseball fan. But I was down there for the very first day that Occupy Wall Street was down there.
I'm jealous.
And it was pretty.
I'm really jealous.
It was very exciting, and I got back there a couple of times, and of course, eventually it was closed down. But I don't think you can close down the spirit that it evoked out of people. It really kind of
stop the idea.
It kind of emboldened a lot of people. Where were you? Where were you when Occupy Wall Street was going on?
I was actually at home because I remember seeing it on the news. I don't remember it well because whenever my stepdad would watch the news, he'd get angry at the world. So then we'd go over to Jeopardy.
That's what I grew up with, eating dinner in front of the TV set, and it was kind of rough between my father and me.
Well, why don't you think college students might revolt when college tuition prices go up,
For one thing, it's like, since I never went to college, I don't want to speak on behalf of college students because I couldn't afford college. My parents, and I don't blame them for this at all, they didn't want to take out big giant loans for college, which at the time I was annoyed. But then I realized that, it's not their fault. It's the fault of colleges and, just how the country's ruled. But in a general speaking, young people probably aren't doing the riots, revolting as much, because when we're young, we're called idealists, and they say that in such a negative term. I get told all the time, since I'm supporting Bernie, that I'm just an idealist, and when I get older, I will learn better. As I look at Debra. But I think that idealist is such a positive term because it means that you're thinking and you're learning and you're having these great ideas. And yes, are some of them probably impossible, some ideas that you have? Probably, but you don't know unless you actually try to make them a reality. And when you get told that, you know, it's not going to happen, you're just an idealist, you'll learn, you tend to get more cynical.
Right.
And, you know, I see it all the time, you know, young people or older people, like, you know, parents or grandparents, when they were young, they probably were the same way. They probably had these great ideas.
Right.
And then the world said, it's not going to happen. And then they grew up and they became cynical of idealists.
Right.
And so I think that that has something to do with it, that we do just kind of sit back and take, you know, rises in student debt. I mean, a college in Connecticut, like State College, per year can cost over like $25,000 for in-state tuition,
Wow.
excluding dorms.
And books and
Yeah.
How do people pay that? I don't understand.
I don't
Well,
understand
the big question they ask Bernie is, how are we going to pay for your
Right.
free college tuition? And I guess the answer is, we already do.
Yeah, the thing is,
taxes.
the free things, everybody's like, Bernie's going to give you free stuff. You know, who's going to pay for all this? The thing is, what we pay in taxes, and this is my first year doing taxes, so I haven't done it yet.
Welcome to the world.
Thank you.
Not that complicated.
Yeah.
The form's pretty easy to
My
understand.
aunt's an accountant, so she's going to help me out.
That's lucky.
But, you know, the free stuff, what people pay in taxes, it's going to the wrong places. And then
Exactly.
if we kind of reorganize that money into actually paying that, and if we, you know, there's all talk about Bernie's going to raise taxes, and he wants to on the really, you know, the wealthiest people, you know, the upper middle class, not upper middle class, but
Right.
the upper class.
Right.
And if
1%.
he raises their taxes a bit, and then they take the money from that, which they can do if they're living within their means.
Right.
Then they can take that money and put it into these things all across the country, whether it's for
Right.
education or healthcare or even stuff having to do with climate change.
Right.
There was a young man who asked a question of Bernie Sanders during one of the debates or one of the town halls. I don't remember which one.
I think it was a debate. It was a town hall. I know what you're talking about.
Okay, so
it
he
was
stood
a town
up
hall.
and he asked him, you know, he said that his concern was about his taxes going up over the health care issue. And what Senator Sanders was explaining, and I thought he did it quite clearly,
He did.
was that if your taxes go up by $500 a year to pay for single-payer health care, but your health insurance costs go down by $5,000 a year, are you not coming out ahead? Or
Right.
do we not win
Yes.
in that arena?
And
So he does have very specific ways of doing this. What frustrates me is that I think a lot of people who simply say, pie in the sky, yeah, he's going to give everything away and I'm going to pay heavy taxes for it, they're not doing the research into what the explanation of the
Yes.
source money is.
And what's interesting is the same man at the end, I forget who was hosting or moderating the town hall. I want to say Anderson Cooper, but it might not have been him. He said, what do you think now of his answer? And the guy who said he was either middle class, he was in middle class, I believe, he said, if raising my taxes is going to do that, help me. I don't know the exact quote, but he said, I'm okay with it.
Yep, he
Which,
came away, I
yes,
think, a Bernie supporter
I do
after
too.
that question. It was great.
Same thing with not only with healthcare, but also with college. Well, we talked about college tuition, but
Yes.
also healthcare. Both of them. If the government is collecting taxes, and I grew up during Eisenhower. That was, and he's one of my favorite presidents. And back then, the wealthiest Americans paid as high as a 90% tax rate. And I don't remember reading about or hearing about many people squawking and complaining about about having to pay a higher tax rate than they do now, because they understood that it's being an American that allowed them the opportunity to get wealthy. So to have to give some of it back, it wasn't that horrible a thing. I mean, you like to keep your hard-earned money, but if it's being invested in such a way that's going to benefit not just you, but other people too, and making the country stronger, heck, what's wrong with that?
Let it be.
What the heck's wrong with that?
Yeah, I think, it's just all these socialist ideals, it's just
See,
not
pride.
There's a couple. There's a couple of anti-socialists out in the audience that are frowning.
It seems to have such a negative connotation. We're afraid of socialism and communism, and we're going to have all our rights taken away. And I think that's what most Americans are afraid of. Somehow if we go for Bernie and all our tax money is used to pay for all these services, somehow more government, somehow it's a negative thing, which date back to maybe the time of Eisenhower or McCarthyism or
Ronald Reaganism.
Mm-hmm. So maybe that's what it is, because America is all about our freedom, and that's what our whole country is built on, and maybe Americans are threatened about that.
I would have thought that. I would have thought that back in the not too distant past, of the year 2 years ago, but it looks like, particularly among young people, that they're not caught up in that stereotype. They hear the word socialism and they don't go.
They don't go Russia, communism, and I wanted to touch on that because so many people don't know that there's a difference between socialism and communism. Because I hosted a honk and wave a couple weeks ago in Manchester, which is where you hold a sign that says "honk if you support Bernie," and one person rolled down their window and told me that this is America, not a communist society. One person told my dad to get a job, which my dad has a very good job at. So he found it very funny. But several times we heard the word, communist in Russia, and there's just such a difference between that.
Right.
We're gonna have to.
Shows how ignorant they are.
We're gonna have to wind it down, and we'll come back. We're gonna have some soup, and then we'll come back and we'll do a second show. We'll broadcast Wednesday night 9:30 and Thursday at noon 30. And on the internet, obviously, Progressive Soup on Facebook and on YouTube, Kristen 40, Kristin 40. And we're out there. We've been talking about a lot of stuff over the years, and we're very excited to be talking about this now.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching. We're going to continue the conversation, and as we fade out with the credits, and we'll come back and do another one.
Yes.
Do some more.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
So,